The impact of BYOD on the enterprise, and it's sponsored by Buell Consulting. Buell Consulting is in its 22nd year of providing site acquisition and project management to the wireless industry, needing expanded coverage and capacity for DAS and small cell networks. Buell provides the local presence and expertise to obtain right-of-way agreements, institutional agreements for corporate and educational campuses, stadium venue agreements, public utility agreements, and zoning approvals for its clients. Our moderator I'm going to introduce is Bob Butchko. Bob Butchko is a marketing executive with RF Connect, and he is a successful technology executive in sales, marketing, and business development with RF Connect. He has worked in the high-tech centers in Silicon Valley, Seattle, Denver, and Washington, D.C. He has experience in a wide variety of markets in both the consumer and government sectors. He has also provided executive-level consulting services to such firms as Deloitte and Unisys Public Sector. For most of the past decade, Bob has been involved in the design, installation, and certification of in-building tunnel and shipboard wireless communication systems for both public safety and commercial wireless. Bob has been very instrumental in the DAS forum, and we expect that to continue with the HetNet forum, in especially talking about some of the roles that public safety can play, as well as general commercial in-building coverage. So please join me in welcoming Bob Butchko.
Thank you. So, congratulations on HetNet. I just want to know if our dues are going to go up or down. You know, that's an important aspect of. I'm sure they are going to go up. But anyway, congratulations, and I think it's very appropriate. Okay. Well, good morning. So, bring your own device. I think that. I'm glad that we're discussing this subject, because I think if I went out to the audience right now and picked any 10 people at random and asked them, what is this, bring your own device, I'd get a lot of different definitions, and I'd probably get a lot more questions than I would answers. And the second reason why I'm glad we're talking about bring your own device is because, embarrassingly, I have 2 cell phones. Okay? And this is the cell phone that I say, honey, I'll be home in a few minutes. And this is the cell phone that I say to my boss, thanks a lot for the compliments on doing a good job, okay? So my whole concept here, and I don't have 2 phones because I want to be impressive or because I want to be cooler than anybody else. I have 2 phones because I can't figure out how to make them into one, okay? A lot of people have figured out how to do that and how to basically bring your own device and have it fit well within the infrastructure of the organization and so forth that you're with, or are still struggling with it, and hopefully we can, the panelists here today and what we're going to say, can add some definition and help some folks in the world in this room understand this whole concept of bring your own device. It's really funny, like 2005 when the iPhone came into being and the smartphone phenomenon happened. We're now we're talking about bringing many devices to the fore, and how do you go about doing that? The speed with which our market and our whole business has moved forward is just astronomical, and really something that you have to sort of run to catch up to all the time. So we have a very illustrious panel. We have 2 people from the carrier side, Verizon and AT&T. We have 2 folks from the business side, one from Marriott Corporation and the other from Camden Development, a large REIT. Fernando Perez is going to speak to us first. And Fernando, and I don't want to embarrass you here, but Fernando, and especially in light of all the things that have happened in our country in the last couple of weeks, Fernando is an example of someone coming to this country and starting off in very low-level jobs, and 22 years later having a job that is extremely complicated, extremely technical, and sort of at the top of his game in Marriott Corporation, and that's Fernando Perez. He is one of the most knowledgeable people that I've ever talked to in regards to how do you satisfy the customer inside a Marriott hotel, or any hotel for that matter, as far as Wi-Fi, cell phone coverage, and so forth. He negotiates with all of the carriers, and he's certainly one of the most well-respected technical people in the marketplace in regards to distributed antenna systems and how you make those work in hotels. So, Fernando, if you'd take the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Well, at Marriott, when we talk about BYOD, bring your own device, we have to split it into two pieces. We are the epicenter, being in hospitality, of hosting every single device as soon as it hits the market. Why? The most influential people are those who travel, and executives. They very often stay at our places, at our hotels, nationwide, worldwide. And as soon as the device hits the market, they want to try it, they want to use it, and it hits our venue. And they're expecting the devices to perform. And the best thing that we can do is providing a stable network, whether it's the HSIA on the unlicensed spectrum or a strong, robust cell phone signal on the licensed spectrum. There are too many pieces on the licensed spectrum that we can control. Not the fact that we build it that doesn't mean that the carriers are going to come and plug in and provide an RF source. The cost of RF sources has increased tremendously. The inability of using bidirectional antennas nowadays has been a challenge for us, because now, even though when you have funding for a DAS, from the owner's perspective, you not always have the carrier ready to pony up $250,000 to put a base stations on a large venue. So what we try to do to satisfy the BYOD needs from the customer's perspective, from the guest perspective, from the conference attendee perspective, is to provide ubiquitous coverage throughout the facility so they can bring the devices that they want. The other segment is the enterprise side. We have a little bit more control on that side. The reason that I said that is the fact that IT has been highly consumer-driven, the consumerization of the IT, we're not exempt to that. So, like Bob said, when the iPhone first came out, we held the gate closed for a little bit. We were a strictly BlackBerry shop, and that didn't last too long. Executives and everyone who was able to get a hands of an iPhone said, how come we don't use this? So we started to do trials and smaller segments, trying to understand what were the risks of implementing something that we were not familiar with, the encryption levels that it had, security, how was it going to affect, how are we going to control it, who do we see who's on the network, who's not accessing proprietary data. So we began to do the tests and the trials, and we quickly learned that encryption on the device when the device was at rest was not sufficient for what we needed. And how do we fix that? So that's when mobility device management solutions are starting to emerge. So we had some great security capabilities on the BlackBerry Enterprise server, and we're all familiar with what that does. But all the guest user interface abilities that the iPhone had were very appealing to the user. And we had a very hard time, like I said before, keeping the gate closed. People were clamoring for the devices, how comes we can use it? So we had to start working on it and try to provide an answer, why can't we use them? So when we decided to start using them, we started native capabilities of the security device. We started with the 3GS when more encryption became available. And we started using ActiveSync. So this was not the original idea was that people might be willing to pay for the device if they were willing to connect their cool device. But as soon as we expanded the trial and agreements with their BlackBerry 2-year contract became due, they said, well, a brand new device on the iOS level, on Apple device, costs the same than a 2-year contract on a BlackBerry. Why should I pay for it? There goes the savings. So if you are trying to look at BYOD, trying to generate savings, thinking that people are going to come in and pay for the device as a monthly subscription, you have to be careful. You will not be very popular with your chief financial officer. because you're going to have a lot of answers to provide regarding security, regarding the ability to have those users put those accounts into individual liable accounts, which often provide less discounts than the corporate liable discounts your enterprise offers. You are going to have to create applications, the applications that you had built for a specific operating system. You're going to have to modify those to adapt to other than BlackBerries or other than whatever you were used to. So changing in policies, the stipends, an issue has arisen that, is a stipend that is given to the user, is that taxable? You need to involve, when you start looking at BYOD, start working with your enterprise, with every single department in your enterprise. Human resources, adoption of policy, who's going to receive what, how much stipend is enough. You're going to create another issue. If you have everybody on a single billing, pooling minutes is going to be a challenge. It's harder. You might end up overbuying, inability to pool. So there's many other factors that you will have to consider before jumping on the bandwagon of BYOD, because it sounds like a cool word to say. So from our perspective, we have decided to allow other devices other than BlackBerry by engaging the service of mobility device management company. And we bought it as a service. We started with an RFP, which should have been an RFI. We learned many things through that exercise. And what we learned is, we said, well, this is going to be a cost associated to it. And when you open that gate, you allow other users to bring their devices, not only that they have the iPhone and they have the iPad and they have their tablet and their Kindle. Well, before you were paying for one device. That was a BlackBerry, and that's where they got the data. Now you potentially are opening the door to have multiple devices. One user, 3, 4, 2, depending how many devices that person has. And the pricing models on that is all related to devices, not per user. So you could exponentially increase the amount of money that you're spending per user. And that's something that you also have to explain to your CFO. So based on that, if you are looking to save money by engaging BYOD, you have to be careful. You might have to develop new policies internally for mobility within your enterprise, the change of mentality, expense reporting, the cost of providing expense reporting where everything used to be on one bill, not having visibility on the monthly usage, on trends, how to potentially forecast expenses. So it is a big challenge. So if BYOD sounds attractive, you have to do your homework first. And it's a good idea to do trials, proof of concept with different vendors. And you may want to exercise those through our wireless carriers. They resell those solutions, and you might be able to obtain some benefits by getting some of the learnings and buying your learning curve instead of experiencing your own. So.
So this BYOD is a little more complicated than most people think, for sure. Our next speaker is CJ Maier. He's the South Area Real Estate Manager for DAS for Verizon. And CJ worries about BYOD in a little bit different way, in the fact that bringing the Verizon signal to as many people as possible generally in large venues. He works with hotel chains and with stadiums and so forth to figure out how to put in DASs, that make a lot of sense for the building owner and also for his company, Verizon. CJ?
Thanks, Bob. Verizon takes a different approach from this we look at the BYOD as kind of bringing this in and providing the network and the signal source. So we look at this a completely flip side. We're the enabler, per se. So when we look at these venues and hotels and buildings, per se, we're going in and we're trying to prioritize what projects we feel are the most beneficial for the company. We have a limited budget, such as you guys do, I'm sure, with your companies. And we have to look at, a couple factors, our market penetration, the size of the venue, the usage, how often is the venue actually being used a year, if it's a stadium or a hotel. So there's lots of factors that we can have to analyze before we just jump in, because we have to make sure that we're doing the best use of our giving the best use of our money. Some of the items that we look at are going to be our return on investment, our ROI, based on what we're paying, for an underlying agreement. Also, what are the traffic patterns, in the area? We have a macro network, that's usually outside some of the hotels and venues, that we have to take into consideration and play off of that, which also plays into the fact, hey, do we want to look at doing a system that includes BTS, or if we're going to do a BDA, Fed system. And some of the things that, when we go in and evaluate, as Camden is here today, I know they don't want to hear this so much, but when we look at the apartments and things like that, that would be a scenario where we don't have so much of an ROI model that would work for that kind of a setup right now. So we go after more of the high-value targets, such as the stadiums and the hotels that have constant traffic, and the apartment complexes, in some of the more rural areas are lower residential or lower density. So we try to stay away from those unless we have an influx of cash. Those projects are important to us, but like I said, we have to prioritize to make sure that we get these systems done. And then some of our challenges that we face, we hear it, as Fernando would probably like to hear this one, but we run across certain other hotel chains, such as Hilton, that rebroadcast signals illegally. It's really important to understand that a lot of the people that we deal with, the venue owners and operators, don't quite have a full understanding of the implications of our FCC license and what that means for us on a daily basis, that they need to engage into a rebroadcast agreement with us. We've had a couple examples in the South where some of these venues have rebroadcast, and it ends up being more detrimental than not having a system at all, because it's just not configured and optimized in a way that just impacts the entire network and can't even make a call. And we've seen that directly. So that's one of the challenges we're facing, is just education of the venue owners and operators, and who to talk to, how to do it, how to run these systems, and how to get us and the others, such as AT&T, on board legally and properly, so that it actually it works the best for their customers and their employees that do want to bring their own device. Right now, some of the challenges that Verizon is facing, as well as I'm sure the other carriers, is that our demand is going through the roof for these DAS systems, and my list of venues that we need to work on is miles long, and my funding is about a half a mile. So we're trying to work on what is priority, but as we move forward with the data explosion and the usage explosion, it's difficult to keep up, but we do our best. And we just have to prioritize, based on some of the factors that I had mentioned before, as far as, attendance and population, and whatnot. But what Verizon tries to do to prioritize these projects and go after them, our model is, when we have funding and we have a project that we've identified that we need to move forward with, we prefer to go in and do a neutral host solution, so that we can go in and put in a system that can be utilized by other carriers down the road. And that's really the more we move forward over these last few months, and going forward, the venue owners and operators, such as the stadiums and the hotels, are becoming more savvy that they don't want to work with 4 different carriers at 4 different times for independent systems. They want a one-stop shop. and they don't want to have their hotels or their venues ripped apart 4 times and 5 times, and everybody recabling on top of each other. So that's been our biggest challenge, is that we're having to kind of shift our model towards what just Verizon needed in the past, where we would just think about ourselves, to now moving forward into going into thinking about the wholesale solutions for these venue operators. And we were having some success. The AT&T group's got a similar model, and we're just it's the industry's really moving in that direction. And I think it's for the best, because it makes the deployment a lot easier, and really enables everyone to bring their own device a little quicker and a little easier. And then that's all I've got for now. Thanks.
Well, I have some questions for you later on in regards to what you've been saying, for sure. Our next speaker is Rusty Stone. Rusty is the Director of Technology Solutions for Camden Development, which is probably the first or second largest real estate investment trust on the residential side in the U.S. Rusty fundamentally is responsible for advising the corporation in all their new construction projects and in their older facilities, whether they need a DAS, they don't need a DAS, how do you install it, what parts of the DAS may you install, for example, in a new construction so that you can meet the requirements later. It makes all the technical decisions and suggestions to a very, very large corporation in the U.S. And as importantly, Rusty is a singer. He's a country and western artist and so forth, and he plays an instrument and singer. And when he talks, you're going to say to yourself, now, who does that guy remind me of? Willie Nelson. So may I introduce Rusty Stone.
Hi, thanks for having me here. And just to clarify, I'm actually really a blues guy, that I do some country and western. But anyway, of course, Camden Property Trust, where we are a real estate investment trust based out of Houston, Texas. We have about, our property count vacillates generally around 200 to 210 units. When I say units, I'm talking about properties. These are apartment complexes, so there's multifamily dwellings, and typically represent about 68,000 units across the country. And of course, our big challenge, and this the latest challenge of the day, is of course cell phone coverage. I like to tell the folks that we have these discussions with that, we were really hot and heavy in the development piece of the business up until the financial challenge that came on about 3 years ago. And of course, just like everybody else, we put our plans back in the drawer and just basically hunkered down and waited for the storm to pass. Of course, so about 24 months ago, we felt it was time to go ahead and start pulling those plans out of the drawer and start building properties again. We just turned up 4 properties in Central Florida and another phase 2 in a Houston project. But the point is on that is one of the properties we turned up in Tampa, Florida, was a garden style. And just for you folks that aren't familiar with how the MDU or multifamily type of structures are categorized, we have our typical what you call garden style, which is what you would consider your 2 stairwell, 3-story structures, and there's several of them. It's more like a campus kind of environment. Next, we have what we call an urban wrap, which more resembles the hotel type of a structure, where there's about 4 to 5 floors on that share roof space and kind of spread out. Then from there we have a mid-rise and high-rise. So reason I point that out is where you would, one of the places you would least expect to have cell phone issues is in what you call a garden style. Because there's relatively small amount of units within the structure and there's a lot of outside wall to share. Well, in Tampa, we found that, in fact, we built the property into what I call a gray hole. And so at that point is when we realized, well, when we pulled the plans back out of the drawer, something had happened that changed everything. And so in that amount of time, the entire industry and basically our social habits and how we all live our lives and how we do business all fundamentally changed. And, you know, we're not, I say we're not in Kansas anymore because, you know, here we are. We've got to be able to support this. We are committed to make sure that our residents, that we maintain the most desirable properties in the country to live. And part of that is making sure that we allow our residents to live their lives on their terms, which, as I said, this is how they do it. And so I also, when I'm talking to some of our leaders in our business, explain that, you know, the last thing we want to see happen is where we've spent $60 million on a project, put all the bells and whistles in. It looks beautiful. It is beautiful. It is the nicest place in our vicinity. And we get an executive that wants to live there, and he gets shown the apartment and gets so excited that he wants to call his wife and tell her about it, and to find out that, oh man, I don't have cell signal. I don't think this will work for us. And so how much did that cost me? Well, it's hard to say, but it's an awful lot of money. Depends on which community we're talking about. So obviously there's a need for us to address this issue, and of course early on, actually before the crunch, we pretty much saw that this was the direction where things were going. My background is in enterprise network engineering and wireless and from a network perspective and routing and switching as well as project management. So I saw that this trend was on the horizon and had recommended that we, before we put all the plans back in the drawer, I recommended that we start pre-wiring for the inevitable. Again, when we pulled the plans back out, yes, the inevitable was here. So in fact, we have already pre-wired 3 of our projects, 1 in Houston and 2 of the high-rises in Washington, D.C. And in this exercise, of course, as CJ said, you know, we don't want to have to pay for this, but so we start talking to all the players. But you know, we understand the numbers don't work for them. They really don't work for us either. They really, the numbers, when I say the numbers, I'm talking about the numbers of a full-blown DAS system in the apartment community forum. That's a hard sell. You know, anywhere from $350,000 to over $500,000 and on. For something that probably wasn't budgeted for when this project was initially brought to the investment committee. So it's been a real challenge for us, and we've engaged in multiple folks and several conversations. So again, we understand, CJ, the numbers don't work for you. So I brought some money here with me. I was hoping to maybe we could work something out. Sorry. So, but at any rate, so what are we doing about it? All right. So, and well, let me even before I go there. So why is beyond the obvious in the customer experience, but you know, we have applications where our users pay their rent online. They can receive messages about that they've got mail. We stay pretty much, we try to stay on the edge as far as what we can technologically deliver to our customers. So in that, we also are engaged in bulk deals with folks such as Verizon and AT&T. And interestingly enough, I was just down at the Verizon FiOS conference down in Tampa, and they're talking about how wonderful their product is, and it is. It's got all the bells and whistles you could just about imagine. But interestingly enough, a lot of them, this is part of the solution, and this part of the box of tools to take advantage of that. So the providers are so far have been real great about putting together the panacea of what would be great, but for our particular industry, it's hard to find any again, because the numbers are hard for them to come by. It's hard for them to help us with getting the cell signal, which in fact that's part of the big picture. And it's going to be this. We're about to do a bunch of deals with AT&T as well, and we're going to go through this exact same exercise. So that's part of the why is it so important to us in the multifamily industry. So what am I doing about it? Well, I'm pre-wiring, as I mentioned earlier. I'm going ahead in all of my new construction, I'm committed to pre-wire. So I've engaged the help of some engineering firms to look at the structures and the architecturals and electrical, as well as the site area, and I am having them put together a design based on the Heliax or LMR 400 currently, but I'm also going to shadow that. At least that's my commitment at this point, and I'll clarify this in 2 seconds. But I'm committed right now to also add Cat 5e along with that LMR 400 or Heliax, and I am seriously considering, and likely I'm about to pull the trigger on this, adding a 5/8 Duraline microduct in a bundle to where the likely donor antennas would be. So all this would be wired back to I always have IDF closets in all my builds. Our folks have been good about giving us the right amount of space. So we're already making sure that we embed the backbone, or I should say the distribution wiring in our construction. Now, what are we going to do with that? Here, that's the $1 million question. Sure, I could go ahead and fire up a neutral host DAS and have one of my guys or hire that firm to go slug it out with these guys and get them to sign off on it. We're finding in some of the markets that we're involved in that may not fly because, again, in some of the more dense areas, as DC and such, they're likely going to force us into a BTS or base station type of a scenario. We've already said and established the numbers are very, very hard for all of us to digest. So again, I'm very, very much a proponent of the small cell solution. That's why I'm pre-wiring for what I'm hoping to be the inevitable, that we do develop a heterogeneous small cell solution that I can get rid of that LMR 400 or the Heliax. That's my goal. That's what I'd like to do. But in the meantime, like I say, we're putting in all of what I call the passive or embedded infrastructure. And then once the structure is up and I've got my E-rated glass up and all my sheetrock, then we do a formal site survey. And at that point, I can actually really see what, if any, of that infrastructure I'm going to need. But I can't afford to get caught short and not have it in place before that point in time. And so that's our typical from A to Z, how and why we feel that it's so important that as an industry we come up with, or you all come up with a solution that is not about base stations, and it's more of a small cell or Wi-Fi type of a footprint type of a solution that makes sense for everyone. Oh, and by the way, just as we wrap up later, I just want to let you know, I have 0 cards on me. I'm going through a title change right now, so if you want a card, I just encourage you to go ahead and write down my name and my email address now. My name is Rusty Stone, so that's going to be R Stone, so RSTONE at CamdenLiving.com, and my office number is 713-354-2874. So I'm just going to apologize up front that I don't have any cards, but I'm happy to talk to all you guys. I'm anxious to talk to you guys because I want to get rid of my Heliacs desperately, and I want to be involved in helping come up with the right small cell solution for us. So thanks a lot.
Never call a blues man a country and western singer, that's for sure. So to round things out, thank you, Rusty. To round things out, we have a representative from AT&T Antenna Solutions Group, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. Lorna Slott is here. She's a business development manager. And her responsibility is to make sure that the signal gets to as many buildings as possible in her region, which is up, she lives in Minnesota, so she's from the north part of the country. So, Lorna, would you address this, please?
Good morning, everyone. So I just want to talk a little bit about, kind of take us a couple steps backwards and kind of figure out how did this all begin? Why is this happening? So if you think about it, in the early days of cell phones, we had, flip phones and maybe a little bit of texting, and then data got involved so we could check our email and those sorts of things. Well, things have completely changed since then. If you look at the devices that are out there today, I mean, you've got, being able to send streaming video. You can, there's new applications coming out every single day. The demand is so great. More people have more devices today than ever before. And if we just take a little poll in the room and look around, how many of you out there have at least one device, one wireless device that you carry? So keep your hands up if you have 2. Keep your hands up if you have 3. Keep your hands up if you have 4. Keep your hands up if you have 5. Well, we've got a couple of people who have 5 wireless devices. So do you think that puts a little demand on our network? Absolutely. So that's some of the challenges that we're really faced with. And because of that, people want to be able to use those devices, and they want to be able to use those devices wherever they are. And whether that be, we used to make sure that we were always covering the roads because people would use their devices when they were driving down the road. They would be talking on their cell phones. But today, people want to be able to use those devices in building. They want to use them at work. They want to use them in a stadium. They want to use them in their office buildings, those sorts of places. So it really puts a challenge on the carriers to be able to provide those services wherever those users are. And also, what happens to our network when all these people are using their devices, it really slows it down. So you might have signal, but you may not be able to use your device because there's no capacity. So that's another challenge that we face, that we need to add capacity back into our network. And how we do that is through adding DAS systems into different facilities. So, and it's not just about stadiums anymore for us. That's where it all began, trying to cover a stadium, because not only are you wanting to provide a good user experience inside the stadium for the tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of people that are in that venue, you also have an effect outside the venue because of the people that are using so much of that our bandwidth, that they're actually taking the user experience away from those people who are outside of the venue. So it's very important for us then to provide just a system that actually provides coverage and capacity within that venue. We're not, like I said, we're just not focused on stadiums any longer. We've actually expanded to other areas. And if you look at some of our densely populated cities throughout the country, we look to provide more coverage inside of high rises. because when you get all these people inside of a high-rise, whether it's a multi-dwelling unit or whether it's a office building, people want to use these devices, and so it actually creates more havoc on our network when you've got a dense amount of high-rise buildings and people are trying to use their cell phones. So those are some of our challenges, and if you look at some of the industry studies that have been done, there have been studies regarding asking end users, how they would actually choose a hotel or choose to put their office in a particular office building or to choose a living space, et cetera, and having wireless coverage is one of their highest demand items, and they will actually switch hotels if they don't have coverage. So for Fernando, that's a real challenge for him to make sure that his user experience is good so that he continues to have his guests come back over and over and over again. So then what that does is it puts more challenge on, more pressure onto the carriers to provide that coverage then within those venues. When we started from a BYOD perspective, I used to work in the healthcare space, and I think that's probably the area of the industry that actually started the BYOD demand first because of some of the changes in the laws, and where they went from a corporate responsible device model to an end user device responsibility model. And so that actually started this whole trend towards that. But because of the end user's demands on the type of device that they want to use and the user experience that they want to have, it has actually then expanded into a lot of different other industries, to universities, to even just your corporate businesses these days. So it's really a huge challenge. I think it's exciting for us, yet it is, it's just, because of the explosion, it's very exciting for the carrier, but then it's also very challenging for us to keep up with that demand and to continue to provide the type of services that gives that good user experience. So that's all I have.
Okay, so we have about 20 minutes or so. We'll probably stop in about 10 or 15, so give everybody a chance to take a break in between the sessions. Any questions from the floor? Anybody would like to ask a question? Okay. I'd like to ask. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
My question is for Rusty. Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I was curious, what about installing, and it sounds like you're really talking about all types of systems. For a new building, do you prefer having it set up for Wi-Fi, the neutral host system, or both? Seems like for an apartment building, you're more likely to have, while getting Wi-Fi through a cable company.
Yeah.
And not a neutral host provider that's going to
If you didn't hear the question, the back, it's the issue between cell phone coverage and Wi-Fi. Rusty mentioned cell phone coverage only, and the question is, do you provide Wi-Fi also along with it, or do you provide Wi-Fi first as a substitute for carrier for the cell phone coverage?
Is this on? Hello. Yeah. My preference is to get the job done in the least expensive way possible. So the real answer to your question is, or maybe an underlying question is wireless in a position right now to be able to satisfy the need for cell coverage as well? Well, there's different folks that have different positions on that, and some require third-party apps. I'm not a big fan of that particular type of scenario. I do understand that there are some new Wi-Fi solutions that are around the corner that may very well make the macro network aware of that network. I believe it's 802.11u that addresses that. That would be a great solution. Like I said, I'd love to get rid of the heliacs. That's my preference. But in the interim, until I can get a solid, firm, it's good to go from these guys, I have to prepare for whatever the scenario may very well be. But my preference is small cell and or some sort of a homogeneous small cell that covers Wi-Fi and those bandwidths or those frequencies that for cell phones. And I know those solutions are actually out there right now. It's just a matter of getting everybody to say, okay, it's all right to use them. Does that answer your question, or okay?
Actually, that was a plant, because the next session that Darlene, we're gonna talk about Wi-Fi in buildings along with the carrier DAS. Another question, sir?
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Ephraim Omer. I'm the CEO of Gatronics. We're making antennas, designing and making antennas. My question is to Fernando Perez. How much is the effect of the visual of the antenna, let's say how it is installed, and does it affect the decision making on which antennas will be installed in a hotel, for example, if it's above ceiling, through ceiling, below ceiling, and how much does that weigh in?
Well, the aesthetics are very important to us, especially the higher you go on the brand or the most luxurious the brand is. Owners are very specific on what they want to see in the ceilings. You know, they buy thousands of dollars in chandeliers, and the last thing that they want to see is an antenna sticking around to it. So the requirements change depending on the brand. We're not too specific on the lower tiers, but there are some requirement and guidelines based on the different brands. And ideally, we wouldn't like to see them. We work with integrators that do a great job of disguising the antennas and minimizing the amount of patchwork that needs to be done. But the technology is out there. The thing is that we're trying to get the radios closer to the user, and unfortunately, you can't defy physics, so it's a challenge, but it's very important to us.
So actually completely hidden antennas above ceilings would be very interesting for you, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but the thing is that you have to mitigate, you know, how important that is and how is that going to affect the actual design and how much it's going to increase the cost. But, you know, having too many antennas is an issue, and not having visible is another issue. So we try to work around it, but, you know, our integrators do a great job at it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There's another question in the back. Yes, sir.
My name is Robert Matheny with Capital Broadcasting Company, and we have a facility with over 1 million square feet of office space plus a ballpark venue for a AAA baseball team. And I'm interested in what Rusty was saying about the cost of deployment and the possibility for, you know, partnerships with the carriers or others. Could you talk a little bit about how these things do ultimately end up getting financed? Does it typically always fall to one party or the other, or are there some unique models that are emerging in terms of partnership or otherwise?
Fernando, you want to start off with that?
Well, the piece that is most attractive to the carriers is to be in a high revolving door. The larger number of seats or facility that you have, the more attractive it makes it to them for a couple of reasons. One is the capacity to serve as many customers as possible. The other is try to offload on the adjacent vicinities what the micro network strain is. So they try to kill two birds in one stone. We had a much greater success in having the carriers interested in those large venues and high-end facilities than what we have in the smaller ones for basic reasons. So, you know, like JC was saying, you know, they have to diversify their investment and try to justify and look for a return on investment. But, you know, the cost of investment is tremendous. And what we try to do is work with the carriers, make it easier for them. So when there is funding available on those markets, they look at us as a high value venue for them to install their facilities.
I'd like to add one thing there too. It also depends on who your business account is with. So if you have lines with Verizon, of course, there's going to be more incentive for us to step up. The same thing for AT&T. You know, it's a two-prong approach.
And I'd just like to add something that there are business models emerging. You know, if you were to put in your own DAS system, you know, we understand that that's an expense, but if you were to do that, the carriers are more likely to join because there's less of a cost for the carrier. But then, you know, the one thing I must say that you should work really closely with the carriers, though, to ensure that it's designed to their specifications.
Yes, sir.
Youngie Kim with SK Telecom. From what I'm hearing is that there's an economic justification for having some of these solutions, but in other countries, they use more of a shared infrastructure or neutral host. Is one of that, Lorna, you were saying, is that one of the emerging economic models, or what you just described was a building owner-owned, I guess, financing? What are the issues for consider putting in a neutral host system?
We AT&T, it always puts in a neutral host system. For the most part, let's just say this: for the most part, we approach every venue as a neutral host system. If we know the other carriers are absolutely not going to be interested, then we may change that model a little bit. But our stance is typically neutral host. Do you want to add to that, CJ?
No, I think that we're exactly the same model. I mean, just to touch on that, it's definitely to our benefit to do neutral host, because one of the other components that people may not be aware of is we also have the expense side of the monitoring and maintenance of that system. So by doing a neutral host and being able to bring other carriers or other entities onto that system and sharing that, you know, ongoing expense costs is big. And that's definitely incentive for whoever owns the system.
Right.
Other questions? I have a question now that we've gotten to this subject, and actually some of the questions from the audience were reflective of this. You know, as DAS and the need to provide cell phone coverage in these buildings has increased, and we've kind of gotten to the mass marketplace now. It's not just the early adopters and innovators that want to put these systems in. It's everybody that wants to put a system in that owns a building, essentially, in some form or fashion. And it seems to me that it's sort of a black and white scenario. You go to, this is to the carriers, you go to the carriers and say, you know, we'd like to have you either finance the putting in the DAS, and you'll come back because it's just a single office building, for example. It's not strategic to you. And I think we certainly realize that you're not going to foot all the costs. You can't. There's not enough money in the world or tea in China to, you know, to put DASs in all these buildings. And Lorna, you alluded to this. There's got to be some middle of the road model where the carrier can participate and make it easier for the building owner. A BTS, for example, or a big cut on the cost of a BTS, or just putting something like that into a building to sort of participate, you know, in providing DAS coverage for the building, but not jump in the water completely and do it all and have your own neutral host and so forth. Are those, you alluded to that, Laura, are those models coming to the fore? Because you just can't cover the whole world here, but most of the world wants it.
Right. Yeah, I think that, I don't think that every model has been developed yet, and I think that there are more to come, but because of the demand and because, you know, we don't have the, we couldn't possibly, Verizon or AT&T, have enough resources from a dollar perspective as well as from a people perspective to cover the demand, to actually, you know, address the demand. So these other types of models, you know, we feel strongly that they need to, you know, continue to develop. And, you know, it might come down to when you are building a high-rise or when you're building a building that you know, like Rusty does, take that into consideration and have the, you know, at least the DAS designed and put the infrastructure in as much as you possibly can. Or the other, if you look at the other side of it, not just the responsibility of the building owner, but the responsibility of the equipment manufacturers to develop and create new solutions that are less expensive so that we can deploy more.
Right. And I'll add to that too. One key component of the models that we have been seeing is because of the high costs that are associated with these venues. And if you want to get into some of the venues that have lower margins, such as an apartment complex and whatnot, one of the really key things to keep in mind is, I mean, we're having to move away from the rent model. I mean, almost exclusively. I mean, there's still venues out there that still think that they can, you know, hey, we're bringing all this to the table for them, and then we still have to pay them. You know, there's no way that model works at all really anymore, and we're trying to, you know, avoid that more and more. So that's one of the incentives, you know, to get the carriers to really look at it. You know, if we're willing to put up the capital and build that system and operate it, you know, we're trying to shy away from also having to cut a check on a monthly basis as well. That doesn't work at all.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
So on the other side of that, if somebody puts the system in themselves, are you willing to pay for the use of the system that somebody else finances on a sort of monthly basis? Or what kind of commitments do the carriers make to help somebody who's willing to install it with their own capital to basically finance
Yeah,
that?
I mean, that would change the model per se. So yeah, I mean, we'd be able to look at those numbers and evaluate it, but yeah, that definitely changes the dynamic, and I mean, we'd look at each scenario independently and figure out what's best, but yeah, that's something that's possible. You know, it's just that, you know, I think that the key thing is, and we're dealing with this in venues and stadiums, is that we've got to remember that we have a lot of shared customers, the carriers and these venue owners, and we're trying to take care of both of them. You know, we're both trying to take care of our mutual customers, and by some of the venues adding additional rent that, you know, blocks us out of being able to do it on a financial model, it's only impacting their customers as well.
Right. Exactly. I agree with CJ.
Okay. Yes, there's right behind. Yes, sir.
Mike McNally, Maverick Construction. Rusty, really question for you on the apartments, and I guess Verizon and AT&T as well, is from your wireline side, they spend capital on the MDUs for the 5/8 microduct. Do you work with your wireline side to leverage that CapEx to also expand it to cover wireless at any point?
Well, we work with the providers for the service that they bring in as far as the voice, television, and data, you know, if it's like a triple play or a voice, whatever that might be. But it typically doesn't incorporate anything to do with the DAS. So, for instance, on an AT&T build out, then they, you know, I get involved with all of these folks when the property is still just on paper, and make sure that we all understand what their design is going to be and who's providing what. Typically, AT&T will provide their own fiber as well as Verizon. So they're providing that. In some cases, I have to provide the pathway. And interestingly enough, even within, like for instance, AT&T, it depends on the region as to how the deal is. There's different regions that do business different ways. So again, a lot of it just depends on the deal and how well you were able to do with the contract. You know.
Okay, good. Any other questions? I think we can see that the need for in-building wireless communications, both cell phone coverage and all that other that implies, is certainly you sort of cross the chasm into the mass marketplace. Everybody wants it for their particular building. I think we're probably not at the stage where there's a unified formula for how to do that. You have to negotiate and deal with lots of different people in the process. The carriers, your tenants, the equipment manufacturers, systems integrators, consultants, the whole bit. So it's a bit of a complicated scenario that I think most likely will morph into some sort of a standardized way of approaching this, as we go forward. So anyway, thank you very much to our panelists. You did a great job. I appreciate it very much. And that concludes this session. We'd like to take about a 5-minute break so everybody can kind of stretch a little bit for about 5 minutes, and then we'll start with the second section. Thank you.